Hi everyone, welcome at the Innovation Café, also here live and also online for the people watching. For the people that haven't been here before, the Innovation Café is a networking event where we show what Eindhoven has to offer in the fields of tech, design and knowledge. And today we have a talk by Dvorah Graeser. She's going to talk a little bit about their company KISSplatform and KISSpatent as well.
Yes.
Yes. So she's going to talk about AI innovation with us. I will see you afterwards, and Dvorah, it's all for you.
So thanks so much for the introduction. Thanks to the Innovation Cafe for hosting me, and thanks to you all for coming out. I'm going to talk about AI innovation for the non-expert. So who am I? Hopefully, Okay. There you go. Yeah, the AI would have done it much better. Okay, so this is me. I am a US patent agent. I'm actually living here in Eindhoven. I have two companies here. One is KISSpatent. We prepare and file US patents. And the other is KISSplatform. And we do AI innovation in the area of commercial intelligence. So information about companies, patents, markets for our clients. Education, well, the interesting thing is I've actually been programming since I was 16. I got my PhD, though, in pharmacology while I was programming, so I ended up programming for the Human Genome Project. So this is what happens when you spend too much time hanging out with lawyers. The main point here is the content of this presentation is for educational purposes, and no part of this presentation constitutes legal advice, and no attorney-client or agent-client relationship is established by this presentation. If you have, I know, isn't it great? If you have specific questions afterward, however, please connect with me. I'm happy to answer them. So here's a quick overview of the talk. Just want to check the time. We're going to talk first about what is AI innovation. I'm going to take a very broad definition of this, not necessarily the traditional technical definition. Talk about getting started with it, what to avoid and what to do. Who should be involved? So this talk is really focused for folks who have a company, anything from a startup to a large company. Who should be involved at your company if you want to bring AI innovations into your company? The AI frameworks and tools to solve every problem, well, almost, but these will give you an idea of where to get started. And finally, protecting your AI innovation. So you've come up with a great idea, you've put together your tools, your frameworks, your process. How can you keep others from making off with it? All right, so AI innovation, in this case, I'm defining it very broadly. Any software tool or process, framework, platform that uses some form of AI. And indeed, most folks these days, when they talk about AI, they often broaden it to include some kind of automation. So you could even broaden it in that direction. AI innovations these days are tools to help you and your business do something better, faster, cheaper, bring a better experience to your customers, and also bring a better experience to your workers. Some examples, human process automation tools. So these can be tools, for example, when you speak that make a transcript. Otter.ai does a great job with that with Zoom. Other tools can also help automate certain types of business processes. So this is sometimes called business process automation. And the idea is to augment the human being and to help them do things better and faster. Self-driving vacuum cleaners, household appliances are getting smarter. This is an example of one, basically that'll clean your floor, but there are also all kinds of robotics that are coming in to help our lives. And they also are operative. The similar technology can be used, for example, for warehouse automation to let the robots bring packages all over the warehouse. Chatbots. For many companies, this is their first foray, their first use of artificial intelligence. Chatbots used to be quite clunky, and I'm sure we've all had an experience with an online chatbot where you basically ended up cursing its existence because it wouldn't bring you to a human quickly enough and it couldn't understand you. They have gotten much better, and they're even off-the-shelf chatbots that use AI, trained for particular sets of language. So trained for language used in e-commerce. Questions about shipping. My package isn't here. Where's my package? My package hasn't arrived. I tried tracking it. I looked at the shipper. All of these things are the different ways of saying the same thing, and chatbots can actually understand that. RPA is robot process automation. Now, it doesn't actually involve robots, but I couldn't resist the picture because it's like real cute. But RPA is a form of business process automation, but typically involves decomposing, breaking apart the human process, and re-engineering the human process, not only to use AI, but to better mesh with the humans. In other words, you end up redoing the entire process for the company with a combination of software, regular software, AI, and human interactions. Okay. Hey. That's annoying. Oh, it showed up, thank you. Okay, I think this might be a battle between me and the clicker. Home air purifiers, these are an example of a tool which before could be done completely without any form of intelligence, but now intelligence is being added into it to increase its performance. There we go, okay. So getting started with AI innovation, where would you want to start? Well, I can tell you the absolute one place that you would not want to start, and that is with the AI. When bringing AI innovations into a company, especially if this is your first attempt to use it, your first thought about bringing it in, you haven't used AI before, you do not want to start with the technology, because that can easily lead you astray. Now that's true for most kinds of software, right? You don't want to design software starting with the technology. You want to start by thinking about what it is you want to do. But AI can lead you down the wrong path much faster and get you in a much worse situation than regular software because of the complexity of the technology. So where you want to start is with the problem that you want to solve. A well-defined problem will lead to a successful AI project. A badly defined problem will always lead to a failed AI project. And in case you're wondering how often that happens, I saw a statistic, 67% of surveyed executives at major international companies said that their AI projects had failed. They did not perform as desired. It wasn't the fault of the AI, it was the fault of the human defining the problem. So the main problem here is that you need to define your problem, and you don't want to rush to build the tool. Now that little underline there, where it says towards data science, if you download the presentation, that's a link, and they go through this process in some detail. You can get the presentation from the Innovation Café website if you go to past events. So the first question is, what is your problem that you want to solve? And in the case of what is the problem you want to solve, this also includes desired outcomes. If you could wave a magic wand, what would end up happening? At this point, I don't recommend even thinking about if you want AI, if you want people, if you want software, whatever it is you want. You will get to the AI, but defining the problem extremely clearly, particularly with regard to what inputs will go in, what data do you have to support those inputs, and what will come out the other end, is especially crucial for AI. Because AI and machine learning involves training a model or training an algorithm on your data to achieve a desired output. So if the inputs aren't well designed, you won't have enough data, and if the outputs aren't well designed, the AI may work for what you trained it for, but that's not what you want. Then why are you solving it? With RPA, robot process automation, I've seen many large US companies say, oh, we just want to save money. That, in my opinion, is not a good reason to do the project, because simply saving money will lead you to a suboptimal system. It may save you money now, but what's going to happen in the future? Are you building for this moment? Are you building for a few years, for 5 years from now? Are you building for greater customer success? Are you building to increase your market share? So the why is also really important when it comes to AI and to unpicking the different aspects. Now, different stakeholders may come in with different reasoning. The management may say, we want to save money. Other folks may say, well, actually, the problem is we don't have enough personnel. So you also have to sort out the whys within your company as well, particularly for AI. And then how can it be solved? This could deal with AI, but it's also understanding how the humans and the software will be working together. Because even something like RPA, which comes in, actually replaces human processes. It takes apart the human process. It replaces parts of it. Even that, though, still requires humans. It's not like you can send all the humans on vacation and expect the RPA to go marching off all by itself. So the how has to be considered as well, particularly with how are humans going to use your new AI. So who would be involved in your company? Experts in your business. If you do want to bring in an AI project to your company and you don't have any AI expertise, we will get into like who are the kinds of folks you can hire for that. But to start off with, you want to start with people who know your business. So domain experts know the area of your business. So if it's a travel agency, they know about airlines and cancellations, they know about hotels, they know about the gazillion and one COVID regulations and how they all change. Those are people who know the area of your business quite well. Customer experts are also really important because these are the folks who speak to your customers on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones who know what pain points your customers have. For example, they may have a hard time getting answers to certain questions. These questions might be easy to automate with a chatbot, and you can always send them back to the human if the chatbot doesn't work. Just don't make them interact with the chatbot too much before you do that, or else they get upset. But your customer experts, the people who are talking to your customers, will understand how the AI will impact your relationship with your customer, even if it isn't customer facing. What I mean by that is, let's suppose it's behind the scenes. So my company has behind the scenes AI that no one sees, and we're building customer facing AI. The behind the scenes AI still affects how we work with our customers. Why is that? Well, part of what it does is help us sort through, on the patent side, our deadlines, where things stand, making sure that there are reminders. So that gives us a smoother relationship with our customer and gives us more time, for example, to be able to talk with them on the phone or spend more time thinking about strategy. Without that back office AI helping us, we wouldn't be able to work as well with our clients. Process experts are those folks in your business who understand your processes. It could be something as simple as accounting. How do you reimburse travel expenses? It could be something rather more complex. How do you sign a contract? What are the steps you go with that? Or how do you reach out to new clients? What is your sales process? Another type of problem I see a lot is folks do think about the problem they're solving, and they might bring in the domain experts and talk to the customer folks, but they don't always talk to the process experts. The AI that they build is really great for solving a particular process. The problem is it's not their process. It causes friction. It causes folks to not want to use the software, to try to sabotage it or to back away from it. Finally, management. Management controls the purse strings. They decide if there's money, but also the AI needs to fit into the long-term goals of the company. Even something as simple as robot process automation is still going to take a few years to really reach its full potential. So whatever you're building needs to have the long-term buy-in of management. So I'm just checking to make sure we're not going over time. So here's an example of this. Okay. That's me. I'm Dvorah. I'm the CEO, so I'm management. I control the purse strings. If I want to build an AI project in my company, of course I would. If we wanted to build an AI project in the company, if someone else were to bring a new project, I would have to sign off of it for the money reasons. I'm also a domain expert. I know a lot about patents, which is one of the areas which we automate. I also know a fair amount about different businesses, about commercial intelligence from my background. So I'm the person who has to undertake that knowledge and bring it to training the AI, but also bring it to designing the AI to solve a particular problem. Now, I also happen to be a programmer, which is a big advantage. If you have a domain expert who is not a programmer, then it starts getting to be a bit interesting, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But for now, because I'm a programmer, it's easier for me to figure out what's going on. We have Paolo. He's our AI engineer. He is the person who has to take the idea and build it for production level code. So he has to understand what I want, what I am seeking for in the design, or if he's designed it, he has to talk to me to make certain it's consonant, that it fits with our business objectives, and that he understands how it also fits with customer-facing objectives. You don't see it here, but we do have other workers who are customer-facing, and they also speak with Paolo and with I to understand how that works. So he is an AI person, he's also an engineer. Not all AI people are engineers. There is a new area called ML Ops. I don't know how familiar you are with all the different jargons, but Basically, there are some programmers who do something called DevOps. And what they do is they take the code and they make it work in the real world, in a production level, scalable, keep it going all the time. AI engineers do a bit of both. They understand how to make the AI work in the real world, as well as how to have it work theoretically, as well as how it can interact with the different kinds of data. Then we have Ellen, and she is our data scientist. Now, the difference between the two is a data scientist will help you understand what data you need, the kinds of data that you need, can help you experiment with models, can do exploratory runs on the data to see if it can do what you think it can do, can help you clean it and process it and prepare it, and can help you solve the problem. AI engineers can do that, but they're also more focused on actually getting the darn thing to work once you've designed it in the real world, when you have thousands or millions of customers using it to make certain it doesn't fall down. I do recommend, if possible, having both folks. Data scientists can be really helpful, especially in like the design phase, to especially help you understand what the AI can and can't do, and to help you integrate the AI better with your company. Because you don't want the AI to sit on top of your company. You want the AI to be like your cell phone. Everyone has their cell phone. It's with them all the time. They're happy to use it. In general, they can be, too happy to use it. They want to do it instead of doing other things. But the point is, we want the AI to feel so comfortable to your employees that it's like their cell phone, not like this annoying piece of software which is making their life difficult. Data scientists can help with that because they're more problem solvers, whereas AI engineers are more builders. Now, let's suppose I wasn't a programmer. Right? So I actually trained our earliest models, although you never want me doing production level code, as that would be a disaster. But let's suppose I wasn't a programmer. How would this work? Would it work with this particular configuration? It can, but it can be quite difficult. And there's a few ways to approach this. One way to approach this is we have the domain expert. Let's say that person knows nothing about programming. You can then bring in someone who acts as a bridge. I've attended multiple presentations at AI conferences on how to get the domain experts to talk to the AI people and have them understand each other. So you can bring in someone who is a consultant who understands how to do that. Another way to do that is to bring in a data scientist, for example, who is a consultant and who is used to working with different businesses. If possible, one who has some expertise, or at least some experience in your domain. So for example, if you were an e-commerce company, you would try to bring in a consultant, a data scientist who was an expert in e-commerce, who had experience in e-commerce. If you were working in healthcare, you'd want to bring in someone who was expert in healthcare. So you have to bring in someone to act as a bridge. You have to bring in someone with experience, or you need to spend a lot of time communicating. The last can be done, but it can be really, really hard because the domain expert will say something, the data scientist and the AI engineer will nod and say, yes, we understand, and they'll go off to do something completely different than what was expected. And it's just because even the same words can have different meanings, and the expectations can be radically different for these different folks. So this is something to be very careful about when embarking on a new AI project. If you don't have any AI expertise in your company, really work through this particular problem before you get started. How are you going to ensure that there's good communication between all the parties? Okay, do I have time? Got time. So, AI frameworks and tools to solve every problem. When you get the presentation, these are all links, okay? And I just did that because it's just a lot easier if you go and you look for yourself. So, off the shelf in AI is never really off the shelf. Off the shelf in AI means that it is designed to be put together in a relatively simple way without AI engineers and to be usable-ish, sort of, out of the box. Chatbots are a great example of this. There are chatbots that are good for e-commerce, and so they're really good at out-of-the-box working more or less, most of the time. RPA, robot process automation, it's kind of off the shelf, but it's more off the shelf with them coming in as consultants. I've spoken to people at robot process automation companies, and they all tell me the same thing. Yes, it works really well, but if you don't have like a good IT department, a good set of programmers in your company, then you really need to have us coming in as consultants and working with you to build it. But it's much cheaper than building it yourself, and it's quite reproducible. No or low-code platforms are also a bit of a misnomer, a bit misleading when it comes to AI. Why? Because they're either no or low-code if you're already a programmer. And you're an experienced programmer, then you can bring those online quite quickly. But they're not going to be no or low code for, in my opinion, for the average person with no programming experience. But still, off the shelf is cheap, it's fast, and if you can find a solution that's tuned for your industry, travel, healthcare, whatever it is, it should work relatively well outside the box, and you'll spend less time putting it together. At the other extreme is building your own AI model. You can do a Coursera course. I'm doing one right now on natural language processing to advance my knowledge, because that's what I find entertaining. Towards data science, they actually have like a really nice explainer of the things involved. This will take time to build your own. But it gives you the most flexibility, and if you have the expertise, of course, it means that you will get the solution that is exactly built for what you need. The in-between one is something I call supported machine learning. Now, supported machine learning involves frameworks, pre-trained models, assistance in doing what is known as fine-tune training, also called transfer training. So basically, you have a model that works. Let's say it works for natural language processing. It understands typed speech about e-commerce or whatever it is, or it does sentiment analysis. Hugging Face offers a number of these models for natural language processing, which are relatively easy to bring online. Great interfaces, great documentation. We use them. We love them. Certainly easier than bringing up your own models online and training from scratch. Datature does the same thing with images. They also have a no-code solution, but it's really more of a supported framework. What it means is that a programmer with less AI experience can bring it online relatively quickly for image processing. So these are great if the off-the-shelf solutions are too rigid, they don't give you the flexibility that you need, and you have some AI experience or availability of expertise in-house, and you want to use supported machine learning. We actually use the supported machine learning of Hugging Face, NLP, and also we build our own models. We use a mix. I can say that right now, when we want to do something, first of all, I actually do look for off-the-shelf solutions. If I can find an off-the-shelf solution that works, I will use it. Because the point is not to be the cool AI company, the point is to make something that makes your customers happy and works really well. I haven't found any yet, but I do look. The next thing I do is I look at supported machine learning. Hugging Face. We preferentially will use Hugging Face if they have something available that works for us, and maybe fine-tune train it, so do a little extra training, rather than starting from scratch, because it's just a heck of a lot easier. It's online, it's in a cloud environment, it's really nice, and they also have really great support. But we have actually also built our own AI models, particularly when we're doing things with ensemble learning. So we do this for patent search. We use semantic search. You put in some text, we find you patents. There are classifiers from Hugging Face, for example, that claim that they can do it. They don't really work that well, and they're kind of wonky. So we actually use a combination of some Hugging Face, but also our own models that we put together with regular software. So if you have access to all of these tools, then you will have ultimately the best experience, in my opinion. But of course, off the shelf is easier to do if you don't have as much expertise. Okay, so protecting your AI invention. Let's suppose you put something together with a combination of your own programming, other people's models that you fine-tune train, your own process. It's a mix. That system can be patentable even if you've taken a bunch of other people's pieces, modified them, added your own. The whole system is potentially patentable. So in that respect, AI innovations are like any other software invention. They are protectable with a patent. Patent is per country, so you can protect your AI idea in the US and also in Europe. Yes, I know Europe is not a country, but Europe acts as a country for patents. China, many different countries. Copyright is weak. It's very difficult to protect your innovations with copyright, sadly, in the software area. EU also offers database protection. That's a special kind of protection when basically for the database, for your collection of data, which for AI can be very important. Because your data, they say that data is the new oil. Has anyone heard that? Well, data is the new oil, and the more data you have, the happier you are, when it comes to AI in particular. However, now, so I've said in this respect, AI inventions are just like any other kind of software invention. But they're also different for patents, and there's a few problems with this. One is that the examiners aren't always completely well trained in AI. They don't necessarily know what it is. And if your examiner, who's going to decide if you're going to get that patent, comes up to you and says, you haven't described the idea well enough, if your answer is, well, that's because you don't know your field, you are going to lose. That is not good. So you want to give many more details. You want to assume the person looking at it does not know their field, because they may not. You have to know which features are important. Just me saying, oh, I'm using AI. I use the CNN. I don't know, I'm using this NLP algorithm. That's not enough. You have to explain, like, why, what's it doing, what are the features, what's important. I mean, why is it different from anything else? Why can't you just use like a regular software program? Why did you use that particular AI? And you also have to describe the application of the models. So in detail what you're doing. So it's not just the AI, it's the AI in a process. It's the AI in a system that has a flow that goes through the system. Finally, if you need help with AI patents, please do contact me. I'm happy to do it on a friendly basis. My contact information is here, but also if you are looking at this, if you download the presentation, go to the Innovation Café, past events, look for my event, and download the presentation. You will get all this information and also all of those great links that I included before. So thank you very much, and are there any questions? Yes? Sure. It's up to you. You can face the camera. I will have to repeat your question because I'm mic'd and you're not. So, okay.
So I hope you don't mind.
Sure.
So my first question is that you start with that we need first understand our problem, and then we can solve it. But I think it's not only AI related. It's basically all kinds of things related. If we want to solve it, first we have to understand it. So my first question is that if there type of AI can help us to identify the problem and root cause, help us to identify the gaps, and I think from there everything gets easier.
An excellent question. Okay, so as we pointed out, in fact, it is true that for any kind of problem, you have to identify the problem, which is true for any kind of software. But the question was, for AI, are there kinds of AI that can help us identify the gaps? Maybe help us identify what the problem is. And there, I think it depends on what it is you want to measure, of course. So let me give an example. For warehouse automation, one aspect that you could use actually the AI to measure, if you were to track how long it takes and what path do people take as they go through the warehouse. So Amazon did this. They tracked people as they went through the warehouse. They tracked them with image, video. They tracked them in all kinds of ways. And what they were looking at is how far do people have to go? Is this done efficiently? Where are people going to pick things up? How long is it taking? Is this a worthwhile thing to apply? So if you have a complex problem that involves a whole lot of processes, not one big one, but a whole lot of like smaller processes, then AI can be used for that. And in that case, they could track it with video and could check it. If you want to use it for quality assurance, let's say you want to make certain any flaws in what you're making, well, then AI is fantastic. You have the image data, you have what is known as non-destructive testing, NDT, which uses ultrasound and X-ray and image and just all kinds of stuff. You can plug all that data in and it can help you understand where the problem might be lying within your process. So the AI can help with that. But you still have to know a bit about what is the very high level problem. Like with Amazon, it is that people are expensive and they get injured and they complain. And then we have to pay them money and we don't want to do that. So what we want to do instead is if we had like automation, we could actually have a much more efficient process. And of course, as they would point out, which is also true, we could avoid injuries and things like that. So they knew that they wanted to introduce automation. They wanted to replace people and have a more efficient and streamlined process. So for that kind of a problem, which is one where you can obtain the data as part of your process, you can use AI then to actually help you understand where the process lies and help you define it further.
But this also happens when we try to solve problems for certain company or clients per se. there were missing links between different software this company using. And then when that happens, there was any sort of software or AI can come into place to be helpful?
There are a lot of tools that will help you gather your data, clean your data. There are a lot of processes and consultants that can help you with that. There are frameworks that could do that. It depends actually on your area, but if you have that question, in particular, if you send me an email, I can send you some suggestions for that. AI has actually gotten a lot better for the data processing, but one of the reasons I do recommend hiring a data scientist is that's one of the things they're really good at. And it's especially true if you have a lot of like unstructured data. So if it's sitting in a nice table and it's all nicely formatted and it's all clean, that makes life much easier. But let's say it's just like a whole pile of logged customer complaints because you're doing that for quality control at your call center. That is all over the map, and it can be in all kinds of places, and it may be in different formats, and as you point out, different softwares. So then having someone who really knows how to use that can be helpful. Even though there are frameworks that help you to do that, I still think in that case you need that human. You need that data scientist to come in there and start kind of whacking away at your data for you.
So then basically the right approach is that we first need some expert to help us to collect all the data that's needed, and then we adopt whatever, let's say, process mining, RPA, etc. But the very first point, there has to be someone help us to collect the data.
Right, so here's the question. I forgot to mention the second question, which is if there are frameworks that can help us with data. Yes, there are. But then the other question is, do I recommend or saying you'd have to have an expert who can come and help you kind of clean and process and collect the data? I do recommend that. Because if the data isn't really, 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 really good, the AI is not going to work and you're not going to be able to train it. So it actually makes sense, in my opinion, to have a human come in and help you bring in the frameworks and bring in the cleaning and maybe hire other people as well to make certain that the data is actually tip-top. There are also ways to have humans check your data. Amazon has that service known as the MT, or the Mechanical Turk, or the MT, where you can actually hire humans to check it as well. But starting with really the absolute best data is important, but also not being afraid to go and scan stuff in. Insurance companies have a ton of claims data, and it's in paper, and then it was scanned, and the OCR is ugly, and it's not very well put together. They actually had people go through and clean that up and put that together, and they were using that then to actually have like a more improved process for claim adjustment, that is to decide to pay money or not. So I wouldn't be afraid of going for that ugly data, because that ugly unformatted data can really be your new environmentally friendly oil for your company.
Then that can be also, in other words, that can be also done by someone already within an organization who understands the business, just clean it up before moving to the next step. Is that what you're saying?
Well, so the question is if someone already within the business could clean it up. And it depends on how much they know about the data. You do need people within the business to say where the data is. There are companies, banks in particular, are particularly guilty of this. So what did they do? They had an original computer system. They had another one, and another one, another one, another one. The data's all over the place. There are tons of banking systems. I've heard rumors that there's still banks using COBOL. And you should not be using COBOL, by the way, just in case that wasn't clear. But the point is they built this really fragile edifice, and they were so afraid to change anything, they were afraid to modernize. But it meant that the data was everywhere. So they actually had people who knew what data was where, because it wasn't centrally organized. There was no central list of where all the data was. So they had the people help them with the data. They brought it in, and then they brought in the experts to clean it up, and then they were able to move forward. But the more legacy data and systems you have, the more you need the people inside your business to figure out what is where and what it all means.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I have more, but I'll wait for others.
Yeah, so
Sure.
It's a very positive story, but you also mentioned 60% and 30%.
67%.
Yeah, so can you elaborate a bit on the ones that failed?
So on the ones that failed, I can't go into too much details about what I know about the ones that failed. But in general, where AI projects failed was, first of all, I have companies who wanted to bring AI into their company. Why? Because it's AI.
Because your story, you say AI will solve all problems.
Well, AI... AI will solve all your problems if they are well defined and packaged in a way that the AI can handle, and also with the humans. So that was actually, I think one of the first and the biggest problems is not defining the problem well enough. The second is defining the problem in such a simplistic way it makes it hard to go forward. So for example, you were saying like, well, why did, you were asking like right now, the 67%, why did 67% of the projects fail? When they define something, it's often something like, we want to save money. Okay, that's an outcome. That's not a problem, right? And even as an outcome, it's a really bad outcome and my problem because it doesn't deal with any of the internal business processes. So the banks, let's say, they want to save money. They're going to bring in AI. They're not going to modernize their database system. Is this going to work? No, it's not. So.
But if they come to you and say, I want to save money, then you show them the history, say, well, that's not a good problem, so define it differently.
Well, yes, but often, so someone is just suggesting someone were to come to me and saying, well, I want to save money, and I would say that's not a good problem. Yes, I would say that. But internally, management will often drive AI projects without really knowing like what exactly it is that they want to do on a very granular level. That's number one. Number two, as I say, the goal can be squishy, but number three, also, there are oftentimes companies don't want to redefine their processes. So they'll use RPA within a business process just to replace the person. Without actually looking, is the process efficient? Why do we have this process? Is this the best process for where we are right now? Because a lot of times these processes are built on legacies, and they're built on the transition from non-computer to computer systems, and they're built on, you know, John and over here and Jane over there who thought this is a great idea, and so that's why you have it, but it doesn't make any sense. So also the third reason is not being willing to really redo completely the business process and kind of go down to like the foundation level and try to build it back up again. So those, in my opinion, are the main reasons why things have failed. A fourth reason, and I've gotten this complaint a lot, people in big corporations, they'll define the problem, they'll do all these great things, they'll hire in the data scientists, they'll hire in the AI folks, and they have no idea who each other is. So one department will have one AI person, then the data scientist over there. Oh yeah, you should talk to Jane over there. Who? Jane who? Never heard of Jane. Oh yeah, she's working over there. She's this great data scientist. She's working with your data. My data? Why is she working with my data? And that is also a problem, that it's not woven into the organization. It's kind of stuck on top. So the difference between that is, for example, to have a chocolate cake with chocolate all the way through, in my opinion, a very yummy cake, or a vanilla cake, not yummy, with chocolate sprinkles on top. So the chocolate cake situation is clearly happier, but it's also more homogeneous, it's spread through, and it means you don't have people stuck in silos not talking to each other. So that's another reason.
But that's not specific to AI. That's true for every technology, right?
So as you mentioned, it is, this problem is not specific to AI. It can be true for any kind of corporation. AI will take any problem in your process, in your data, in your system, and will magnify it about 1 million times. So if you, let's say, it's like if you have a car. And let's suppose your car, you know, it works pretty well at like 20 kilometers an hour. It works pretty well, but it's kind of clunky and it has a bad suspension and it has this annoying tendency for the brakes not to work all the time. And then you're like, you take the same car and you make it go 1 million miles an hour. Is this going to end happily? No. So it is a similar problem, but unfortunately AI can make things worse, can make underlying problems worse. Anyone have a question?
Yeah, I have a very specific question that's regarding to RP and the process mining.
Yes.
So we talk about if we want to adopt a successful RPA project, then first we have to understand our process.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're talking about process mining. However, when we're talking about process mining, we're thinking about the availability of data, and we're thinking about some of our colleagues, they are supposed to work everything online with the software they're supposed to be, but sometimes it doesn't happen with people work offline. So therefore, the data we collected to them might not be really reliable. And in this case, how can process mining still help us? And what are the root causes that normally make a process mining project fail?
right, so the question there, a very interesting one, had to do with RPA. So you mentioned with RPA, we do process mining. We're going to look at different kinds of data. As was pointed out by the questioner, and this is quite correct, not all the data or interactions that are occurring may be captured through the online software. So this is, for example, the folks within a department who do things on WhatsApp, as opposed to doing it through the enterprise management software because they hate that software because it annoys them. So they bypass it and they do their work much more efficiently, but then it means that not all of their interactions are being captured. That is, that's actually a classic problem. And I've seen that a fair amount. So in that case, that is why you would actually want to bring the people on, and to, in my opinion, for doing an RPA project, the best way to do it is to think over the entire process. So maybe there's one part of a process that is costing you a lot of money, but in my opinion, it's still important to think end to end and to look at every aspect of the process into which that process is embedded. So what comes before that process, and what does that process feed into? And the reason why is when you bring in RPA, one of the ways you can actually save money is to reconfigure the process, not just slap in some AI and pull out some people, but actually change who is doing what. And to actually, for example, maybe have some of your customer-facing folks can spend more time actually with high-value customers. You can offer more of a white glove service, and of course make more money. Or maybe some of the folks in accounting can be spending more time doing things like working with separate software on fraud or looking at financial projections. So simply pulling out pieces and putting in the AI can be a particular problem when, as you point out, people may be working around the existing software, and unless you ask them, you are not going to know that. So again, that's another reason why I think it's really important to bring in the people, but also not to seek to replace the people. They're your valuable folks, and they know where all the data is and what's hidden where and what has worked in the past, but to keep them on, but perhaps to upskill them to a new role, or simply transition them horizontally to a role that you need to have filled, but let the AI take their part of the work that could more easily be automated.
To be specific, bring people in, you mean consultants who understand business processes, or programmer, or?
Well, the question is then who would be involved. So the first question, in my opinion, who should be involved is the people in your company. They absolutely have to be involved. You have to figure who is actually doing this process. I have seen situations where the boss is like, oh yeah, we just have to talk to this one or two people, and one or two people came in saying, well actually no, we do this other stuff, and their boss had no idea who they were talking to or how it was working. So start with the people in your company, but then beyond that, yeah, you'll have to add in extra help, the consultants, the programmers, and others. But first of all, you need to understand what's going on yourself in your own company. Great questions, by the way.
I think, did you have more questions? Or?
Actually, yes, but
I'll keep going, but.
okay, I promise to ask a lot.
Ask one more, otherwise you can keep talking about it.
So you mentioned earlier yourself as a programmer, so which means you also understand business, so which means you're one of few kinds of the combination understand both, but the normal situation we have that we have technology team, we have business team, that they have to talk. And then we can't hire consultancy all the way. So is there any, let's say, practice or suggestion that you can give that how to make the two understand each other, like the training or whatever?
Yeah, so the question is, how do we get the non-technical folks and the programmers to understand each other? So this, from the dawn of computers, this has actually been a rather large problem. For my part, there's a few things that can be done. In terms of trainings, there are trainings available that help with the communication on each side separately, but also bringing them together. You can't use consultants all the way through, as you pointed out, that is quite correct, but consultants can be used to make certain that communication is taking place, and there are frameworks. Now, what do I mean by frameworks? I don't just mean like people walking down the hall, with all these regulations and restrictions, and with people being abroad, you may not be able to walk down the hall. I mean more of a framework of how are you going to be bringing your ideas together, having actually sessions where you're going to be talking about the ideas and brainstorming and doing that, if possible on site, if not remotely. There are some great design houses who have some really nice processes for doing that, and I'll send those links if folks are interested. Hit me up with an email. And a lot of it has to do with building the framework to make certain that people know how to communicate. So I know I said communicate, But like, okay, about what? How often? I think this thing is really obvious. I'm not going to tell it to the programmer. The programmer's like, that's the one piece of information I needed, so I would build what you want. So the frameworks and certain the folks help make certain the folks who are coming from completely different worlds can talk, and it also sets goals and even sometimes almost rules, like this is when you should be communicating, this is how we're going to be doing it, this is where we're going to be capturing it. And there are design houses that help with that, very good ones, and there are also other kinds of consultants just to make certain that everyone is moving together on the same page. Once the process really gets moving, kind of momentum takes over and it's great. But if the process doesn't start well, then it's not going to end well. So, thank you.
All right, thanks to Dvorah. Can we give her a round of applause, please? All right. So thank you for the talk.
Thank you.
I encourage you to keep talking afterwards. I think that helps. I want to invite everyone here to join us at the bar. I do have to ask you to sit down in the bar area because we have to have seated places because of COVID. For the people that were watching online, thank you for watching. And for everyone, keep an eye on the website to see the up-to-date program because we are not 100% sure how we're going to continue after this week, but it will be shared on the website so you can see there what's going to happen next week. So hope to see you then.
Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Hey, you're still here, so you like the video. If you want, subscribe and click the bell. Hey, you're still here, so you like the video. If you want, subscribe and click the bell.